Hello and welcome everybody to today's ISC2 webinar. Once again, as part of our monthly series, I'm joined by Steve Piper, the founder and CEO of CyberEdge. Got some very interesting things to share with us today. Some metrics around what's hot and what's not. What are people leaning into? Where are they making investments in their cybersecurity tooling stack? And also some things that have dropped off the list in popularity or importance for a lot of you out there. So I think you'll find this very interesting. Steve, welcome back. As we were talking before going live, some of the things here kind of surprised me, to be honest, about where people are making some of their cybersecurity investments, or where they're planning to, at least. We'll see how their budget cycles go. But let me kick things over to you, and I'll keep an eye out for those questions from the audience, and I'll be taking some notes myself.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for kicking things off. Thanks to all of you for attending. So I've been doing webinars for ISC2 for probably 5 years now, and multiple times per year, I refer to our flagship research study, the Cyberthreat Defense Report. The majority of the content in this webinar is going to be derived from that, but we're going to be breaking out the content that's relevant to what is hot and what is not in 2024. We're going to talk about purchase intentions related to network security, endpoint security, application and data security, and security management and operations. But we're also going to talk about a few additional topics related to security technologies. We're going to talk about the percentage of applications, security applications that are delivered from the cloud these days, use cases for artificial intelligence, why customers are leveraging external threat intelligence. And then we're going to talk about emerging security technologies. So which emerging technologies are currently in use, or plans are underway for acquisition and rollout. I do want to touch on a few additional topics. Even though it wasn't covered in this year's report, in recent years, we've talked about strong demand for managed security services providers, MSSPs. And of course, as a CISSP, and I've had more than a dozen technical certifications over the course of my 30-year career, I'm a big believer in training and certification. And we have some insights from this year's Cyberthreat Defense Report, and thanks in part to ISC2, which is a platinum sponsor of our report. So I think the best way to get started is to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what this report is all about. But I also want to talk about how this report can be used to your advantage in your role inside of your organization. So about this report, it is a vendor agnostic survey. We do this report every year for the last 11 years. This past April, we announced our 10th anniversary special edition. So every year in November, we ask 27 questions to security decision makers and practitioners. And these are people that work for organizations with a minimum of 500 employees. We're going to go over the demographics in just a minute. But because we have 1,200 survey completions, this survey is highly statistically significant. It has a very low survey margin of error of plus or minus 3%. So you really can rely on the global results in the survey. Now, the survey is designed to assess topics in 4 different areas: organization security posture, perceptions of cyber threats and security challenges, current and future security investments, which we're going to be spending a lot of time on today, and then IT security practices and strategies. I mentioned that there's 1,200 respondents. These respondents came from 17 countries and 19 industries. Now, the results I'm going to be talking today are global in nature, but in many instances, we provide the results in the report by country and by industry. So it's a nice cross section of countries and respondents by employee count. Okay. Now, what I want you to do with the report and these findings, and today we're going to be talking about, what's hot in the way of security technologies in 2024. I want you to use this report as your secret weapon. Download the report, and if there's something that you want to lobby for, these are a sampling of the topics that are covered in the report. Those topics that have a green arrow next to it, those are topics that we're going to be talking about in this webinar specifically. Okay. But if there's something you want to lobby for, a particular investment, or maybe you want to lobby for working with an MSSP, or maybe you want to lobby for training and certification, whatever it is, use this report so that you can tell the powers that be what your peers are doing around the world. Okay. So let's get into this. There are 4 categories of security technologies that we talk about in the report. The first of which is network security. Now, the items on the left, think of these more as technologies. Sometimes they're products, sometimes they're specific technologies that you may find in products, but think of it for today's discussion as technologies. The first column in the table is currently in use. Okay. The middle column is planned for acquisition in the coming year. And then the last column is we just don't have any specific plans at all. Okay, which I imagine is going to be more on the smaller side of organizations. Okay, so the darker the blue, the bigger the number. So let's start. Here we're talking about network security. First column, currently in use. Secure web gateways are the staple of network security technologies, followed by IDS and IPS, which we're going to talk about in a moment, which these days is often included in next generation firewalls, and to be fair, other technologies as well. Secure email gateway beyond that, data loss or leak prevention, and NAC. Okay. Now the middle column really aligns with the title of this webinar, the hottest security technologies in 2024. The darkest blue is next generation firewalls. Okay. So these are devices that incorporate traditional firewall technology, IPS, so intrusion prevention systems, also application control. And many organizations purchase next-gen firewalls but don't turn on the app control function. I would say that's a mistake. There's a big opportunity cost there. You want to limit your attack surface in your organization. Okay. And so with application control, you can set policies of which applications can access the internet. Okay. So for example, I'm just making this up. Let's say you don't want Facebook to be used in your organization, or you can get pretty granular. I don't want any Facebook games to be used in the organization, or I don't want Dropbox or whatever it is. So think shadow IT, think BYOD, but these are different use cases. But you can actually enable application control to limit what applications can be used and communicate with the outside world. That's a nice way to help reduce your attack surface. Now, in modern NGFWs, you also have additional capabilities like IP blacklists or URL filtering, or sort of meets minimum secure web gateway type functionality, and it does vary by provider. And this technology has been around for years, but not everybody is jumping on the bandwagon. So we are seeing that as being the #1 network security technology planned for acquisition in 2024. Beyond that, if you're not familiar with deception technology, I'd like for you to take this as an action item. It's really cool stuff. We're going to talk about deception technology from a network standpoint here, and then the next slide also from an endpoint security standpoint. We all understand that we have a basic concept of honeypots, okay? And so think honeypots, but next generation of honeypot type technology, where you can use this technology from a network standpoint, but also from an endpoint standpoint to detect unauthorized access to decoys of various types. And if somebody's connecting to a decoy, they have no business doing that. The odds are almost certain that they are some sort of threat actor moving east-west laterally across the network, trying to find things. And these decoys aren't patched. They're purposely not patched. They have lots of useful, juicy applications. And so once you discover a threat actor connecting to this, then you can cut them off, remediate them, maybe use a remediation API and cut them off at the firewall. So it severs their in-progress attack. When you think about advanced persistent threats, all the steps of the kill chain, where you stop, an APT at any point during the kill chain, one of the steps in that kill chain is moving laterally across the network, and this is an opportunity to stop in progress threats. Another opportunity is NBA. It's been around for years. It started as NBAD, network behavioral anomaly detection. Years ago, it was repackaged and widely referred to as NBA, network behavior analysis, net flow analysis. So this is baselining normal network traffic, okay, in your organization, whatever normal is for your organization, and looking for anomalies. So for example, let's say that Bob's laptop in the accounting department on average only downloads or uploads, I'm making this up, 30 megabytes of data on an average day. And then suddenly Bob's laptop is uploading, 2 gigabytes of data in a day. Does that mean that Bob's laptop has been compromised? Of course not. But it's an anomaly. It's worth detecting. So, or another example, Bob's laptop should never communicate with Jill's laptop in the office next door. Bob's laptop should be communicating with servers and services and the outside world. So now we see a NetFlow record or JFlow or SFlow or whatever, and we see that Bob's laptop has a direct connection to Jill's laptop. WTF? Why would that be? So that's an anomaly. So these are ways to detect in progress attacks. Advanced threat protection is growing in popularity. It's these days you don't need to purchase like purpose-built advanced threat protection platforms. Often it's built into other things like NGFW, secure web gateways, secure email gateways, but there are some purpose-built solutions that rely on sandboxing, or these days, more often than not, machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then DDoS prevention is timeless. There's also a lot of demand for that, and rightfully so. So Brandon, I'm going to click the pause button here. I think, when you mentioned up front that there were some surprises, I think one of the surprises is on this slide, isn't it?
Well, there's a couple actually. One, next gen firewalls. I would not think that we would still be doing that much of net new deployments in that space, but you never know. I mean, there's been a lot of M&A activity and some other market drivers there, but that one stood out. And then also the deception technology. Quite honestly, I think it kind of ties in a little bit with the behavioral analysis. But that's another one that's interesting to watch. And we were talking before going live that there's been a lot of companies that have either added that capability, acquired a startup to add it to their portfolio, or even just net new startups that are very interesting in that space. I'm not seeing a whole lot of adoption widespread, but I am seeing a lot of tinkering, shall we say. So I think it might be a little further out on the horizon. It'll be curious to see how that looks in next year's report.
Yeah, and while we were waiting for the top of the hour, I mentioned I did a Google search, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised to see, maybe not surprised, but I was pleased to see a lot of major cybersecurity vendors embracing deception technology after acquiring pure plays and integrating deception technology into their portfolios. So definitely, if you're not familiar with that, that's your action item from this webinar. Learn more, which is a nice segue to endpoint security, because deception technology also plays a role in endpoint security, because you can have decoys, agents basically built into or that reside on laptops. But let's start with the first column, currently in use. Basic AV anti-malware. This is threat signature based. I personally don't see signature-based defenses going away anytime soon. I think they still play a role. I think they're going to continue to play a role for quite a while now. And the reason is when you're using artificial intelligence and machine learning and even sandboxing to an extent, these algorithms, these engines are very resource intensive. They're very CPU intensive, memory intensive. And so if you can offload the detection of known threats or even unknown threats that are targeting known vulnerabilities. Notice I say known, because signatures, either the threat needs to be known or at least the vulnerability needs to be known. And better security vendors have ways of detecting unknown threats targeting known vulnerabilities using threat signatures, I think it's going to play a role for years to come because it offloads the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, so that you can, use your advanced stuff that is more resource intensive for detecting unknown threats or potentially zero-day attacks targeting unknown vulnerabilities. DLP, widely used. EDR and EPP, glad to see that the majority of organizations are relying on those technologies. The middle column, plan for acquisition. Hottest in plan for acquisition in 2024, deception technology. Okay, so you have so many endpoints all over the place. Why not, use those endpoints, even though they're in production? Why not have them a virtual machine running on them be a decoy? Okay, because they're so widespread. Digital forensics is increasing in popularity, and then your disk encryption has been around for a long time. I already talked about EPP. That's one of the technologies that are more planned for acquisition. I'm really intrigued by browser and browser isolation, internet isolation, micro virtualization, whatever you want to call it. So these are technologies that when you download a PDF, just for example, from the internet, on the endpoint device, it brings up Adobe Reader, okay? And then once you're done, Adobe Reader closes and the PDF is no longer being accessed. Unbeknownst to the user, that Adobe Reader was really running in a virtual machine. But these days, it's so smooth that the user doesn't even realize it, so that if that PDF was infected with malware, there's no way it's going to infect the base operating system or any other applications because that PDF was opened in the safety of a virtual machine or a micro VM. Really cool technology. I think there's a lot of use cases for that, and we are seeing increased demand for that. I'm going to pause at the end of each of these 4 slides, Brandon. Any thoughts here on endpoint?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. We had a couple of questions come in about deception technologies, thinking deep fakes. We're not there yet. These are more like tripwires put throughout your organization, maybe a file that nobody should have access to or a system. And when they trip that, it goes off, and that's not legitimate traffic or a legitimate user behavior. I agree with you, though, Steve, on the signature base. I think that you're absolutely right. That's the shortcut for the known knowns. But Gen AI, right? What's going to happen is I think a lot of these vendors, especially at Endpoint, are going to start incorporating, going beyond machine learning models, and maybe incorporating some more sophisticated detection capabilities around user and machine behavior, which will probably touch on many of these subcategories here, with the exception maybe of the browser or micro virtualization. But I think it's going to touch on a lot of these things here in the next probably 12 to 24 months. So it'll be interesting to see that where that goes.
I completely agree. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI in about 4 slides. All right, so
Perfect.
2 down, 2 to go in terms of buying intentions. We talked about network security. This is endpoint security. Let's talk about application and data security. Okay, top of the list, currently in use, database firewalls. Okay, then WAFs, web application firewalls, API gateways. This has been really interesting to see, where over the years, deception technology has been rising through the charts. So is API gateways, and now it's not one of the hottest plan for acquisition because so many organizations have embraced it. So if you are not, there's so many security risks with APIs, and it's one of those things that you need to be aware of. So that could be another action item to take away from this if you're not familiar with that. Database activity monitoring, application container security tools platforms, and CASBs. So these are majority of organizations are using these technologies. Now, middle column, number 1 plan for acquisition in 2024, bot management. So distinguishing between good bots and bad bots and mitigating the risks related to bad bots. Okay, a lot of organizations looking at that. I've said this so many times that Brandon and I are both big fans of DevSecOps, and coinciding with the DevSecOps mindset, the philosophies are a whole host of security testing tools like SAST and DAST and IAST and RASP. And these tools are used in-house, but they're also used by third parties. And I see a lot of organizations relying on third-party vendors to do code analysis of software, homegrown apps that are developed to uncover potential security risks before they're rolled out. So, Brandon, any thoughts here?
There's been the whole shift left mentality with testing and such, and getting it closer to the developer at the time they're actually writing the code, because once they check it in and move on to the next module they're working on, they're going to forget it. So getting that, I think, closer to the actual development user is going to be critical. Also, the thing I'm finding is not necessarily surprising is the plan for acquisition for bot management. I've been hearing cases of account takeovers from bots, especially from mobile platforms. Think like loyalty programs and the like are starting to get a lot of attention. So I'm not really surprised there, because that takes a big chunk out of your bottom line if you don't have that well managed.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Yep. All right, 3 down, 1 more to go. Security management and operations. Top of the list currently in use, and this is another example of something that's been rising through the charts over the last 5 years. Active Directory protection. So we're seeing a lot of vendors, especially in the vulnerability management space, cyber exposure management space, embracing tools to detect security risks in Active Directory, stagnant accounts, accounts that should not be there, service accounts that are no longer in use, or part of one of the steps in the kill chain of an advanced persistent threat is privileged escalation. So detecting potential anomalies related to that. So I'm very happy to see organizations jumping on that bandwagon. So that's number 1 currently in use for security management and operations. Patch management is timeless. So of course, that's going to be very high up there. Security configuration management. Okay. Now, I would say, I don't know, correct me if you feel differently, Brandon, but I think most organizations leverage SCM technologies that are built into their vulnerability management platforms, but there are also standalone platforms that do security configuration management that are much more robust. So looking for misconfigurations like ports that are open that shouldn't be, or services that are running that shouldn't be, or maybe there's password policies that don't align with the corporate standard, or ... Cyber risk quantification scorecarding. This has also been rising through the ranks. So, looking at risk in an organization, company-wide, and scorecarding, that organization, which also ties to third-party risk management. SIM technology, widely used, vulnerability management, vulnerability assessment technologies, and pen testing. So the majority of organizations use these technologies. Okay. Number 1, plan for acquisition in 2024, advanced security analytics. So tools, additional tools that are looking for anomalies. Okay. Anomalies in all kinds of different ways, whether it's network anomalies or user anomalies. User logs in New York and then 3 minutes later logs in London. Okay. All sorts of different types of anomalies. TIPs are threat intelligence platforms, big fan of that. And using third-party threat intelligence, which we're going to talk about in a couple of slides. The majority of organizations, the vast majority of organizations, are leveraging external threat intelligence, and one of the use cases is incorporating that threat intelligence into your security infrastructure. So think of TIP as the plumbing for threat intelligence, and also your teams that are responding to threats, and they're validating attacks and researching threat adversaries. So TIPs have a lot of different use cases there. SOAR continues to soar, security orchestration, automation, and response. One of the themes that we see each year in our Cyber Threat Defense Report is lack of skilled personnel. So we look for ways where we can work smarter rather than harder. And SOAR is one of those ways that you can automate repetitive tasks related to opening tickets and responding to potential security events and investigating them, and dot, 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 dot. Full packet capture and analysis. Think of these like as DVRs, where they're recording, every bit and byte that traverses the network, at least what it's able to capture, and then looking for anomalies or potential threats. Also, a nice tool where you've been victimized, there's a cyber attack, you detected it, you want to understand what is the ramification, what if any data has been exfiltrated. Okay, that's another cool use case. And UEBA, looking for anomalies in specific user behavior. So very, very cool stuff here. Brandon, thoughts?
I'm surprised that Active Directory protection hasn't gone up more. That's an interesting one because I'm hearing more and more about that. Even some companies that have had it for a while, switching vendors for some enhanced capabilities beyond obviously what things like Active Directory up in Azure can do for you. I'm kind of interested in the cyber risk quantification and scorecard. Every product has its dashboard. This almost feels like it falls into kind of the GRC, or governance, risk, and compliance realm. What are your thoughts on where that's actually going? Because every one of the categories that you've shown so far has its own metrics, has its own dashboards.
Yep. So I do agree. Yep, this would be in the realm of GRC. One of the topics in the Cyberthreat Defense Report that we've had this year and the prior year is boards of directors. Okay, and we asked, is there people on the board with security talent, or how are your boards of directors engaged? So by using risk quantification tools, you're able to quantify risk in language that business people can better understand. And so it's a nice way to translate the myriad of techie things into business risk, and how that risk could potentially impact the organization from a financial standpoint. And vendors these days not only can assess scores for you, but you can compare your score to your peers. Okay, your peers in even globally, and peers in different industries. So it's really cool stuff. Definitely worth looking into. Yeah, cool. All right, some additional topics. So many of the technologies that we've talked about in these four categories are delivered via the cloud. Many of them are delivered on-prem. Okay, so we asked, what percentage of your security applications and services are delivered via the cloud? Okay, like the management interface is in the cloud, and the data that's aggregated and collected is in the cloud. We asked this question in 2024, and it was 36%, so just over a third. This is a surprise for me, Brandon. I would have thought this would have been higher, and I really want to get your take here. It's only gone up to 40%. So 60% of the applications and services are delivered on-prem, on host, rather than delivered in the cloud. So I thought that was interesting. And this does vary by organization. Government does not mean FedGov. It doesn't even mean U.S. government. This is across all 17 countries. So federal, state, local government across 17 countries. But government and finance are below the mean. Manufacturing and retail are above the mean. But are you surprised like I am?
Yeah, I am. I would have thought, one, the numbers would have been higher because it seems like everything is going to the cloud. It seems like it's shorthand for digital transformation. But what really stuck out was the 45.7% for manufacturing. We don't normally think of them as manufacturing considerations as being really forward thinking. I would have thought some of the others, like finance, maybe would have been ahead of that. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yep, agreed. All right, next topic. So we've talked about AI a few different times in this webinar. So we asked, what are the use cases? And in the report, we actually asked 3 different questions related to AI. So we asked, what are, how will AI benefit the good guys? How will AI benefit the bad guys? And who has the upper hand? And in the report, of those that had an opinion, okay, the choices were, and of course we didn't say good guys. We, the cyber threat actors. Do they have the upper hand, or cyber adversaries or security, teams? Do they have the upper hand? So of those that had an opinion, where either security teams had the upper hand, or threat actors had the upper hand, or it was a wash. Of those that had an opinion on either security teams or threat actors, about 50% more people thought security teams had the upper hand versus threat actors. And I actually agree with that, because there are so many security tools these days that build in AI, from a threat detection standpoint, from a vulnerability detection standpoint, from everything. Generative AI is built into so many tools, being able to query data using natural language. So we asked, what are the use cases for leveraging artificial intelligence? And here, I'll just read the question. Cybersecurity industry analyst predicts that advancements in AI, including machine learning and generative AI, will benefit security teams. Which of the following positive outcomes of AI do you predict that will impact your organization the most? The reason why I incorporated this slide is because I want you to constantly think about, when you're evaluating security technologies, whether they're hot or not in 2024, any of these security technologies. I think it's fair to ask, how is your organization, how are these tools embracing AI? Okay, because different vendors are developing at different paces. The top use case here is improving our ability to detect or block cyber threats. Second, improve our ability to respond to security incidents. Number 3 use case, which is almost a tie with number 2, improve our ability to detect and patch vulnerabilities. And then beyond that, improve workforce efficiency, accomplish more with fewer resources. We talked about SOAR. I think that's a use case. And then tied with that is improve our ability to research threat actors and their tactics. So we talked about TIP, threat intelligence platforms. So a lot of different use cases. So as you're evaluating technologies moving forward, keep AI top of mind and try to understand how vendors are embracing AI to make their specific solutions even better. Okay. Thoughts here, Brandon?
I have a colleague who showed me some screenshots of an actual incident that they worked with Microsoft Copilot, and that part about kind of the improved workforce efficiency. What he said was most striking was it wrote up the report, the after incident report, with all the timestamps of all the events, every time somebody touched a trouble ticket in there, whatever it was, put it all together. And he said that alone saved me a ton of time and a ton of work, especially when you're in the heat of it and you just finished closing an incident and you're worn out from it. He said it was a game changer. So I expect to see use cases, especially for generative AI, to really ratchet up in how we manage our work in the security operations, but also I think there's going to be some new and innovative ways to utilize it. I think we're just at the very beginnings of this, and so when we start to look at kind of the year-over-year trends on some of these things, can't wait to see what next year's report brings.
There's an analogy that I've used with in different ways: smartphones. Okay, so think back, for those of you that are old enough to remember when iPhones, were first invented. Okay, your first ever smartphone, and how cool it was. And it had a camera built right into it. You couldn't do video yet, but you could take still pictures, and you could access your calendar and your contacts, and you could do some other cool things, play some games. At that point, you had no freaking clue what you were going to be able to do with this iPhone moving forward, in terms of video, or in terms of getting into a concert, in terms of boarding an airline, or purchasing things, linking credit cards and, Apple Cash and all dot, 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 dot. We had no idea. Okay. I'd say that's about where we are with AI. Okay. So we're always going to remember the first time we ever played with ChatGPT and you told ChatGPT to create a bedtime story for your kid or to write a poem or a birthday card or write a song or confirm which actor was in what, like, whatever it is. And you remember how cool it was. Okay. We have no idea about the impact of artificial intelligence, how this is going to affect the good guys and the different innovative ways that we're going to be able to embrace this. And unfortunately, how it's going to also impact the bad guys and their abilities to do horrible, horrible things. And of course, outside the concept or context of cybersecurity, how the good things and horrible things that how this can impact our lives. Yeah, I agree with your sentiment, Brandon, that we have no idea what's lying ahead.
And I love your phone analogy. I think that's spot on with regards to technology adoption. So I'm going to be stealing that one for future talks.
Please do. Please do. All right. So enough about AI. Threat intelligence. I mentioned before when I talked about tips that we're going to talk about threat intelligence again. So we asked, how is your organization leveraging threat intelligence? Of course, one of the response, third party, like external threat intelligence. And then, of course, there's a response that we are not leveraging threat intelligence. So that gives us 2 data points. Let's start with the donut chart on the left. Only 2.7% of the 1,200 respondents said that their organization is not leveraging external threat intelligence. If by some bizarre chance you're one of those, and keep in mind this is 500 plus employees, the CDR. If you happen to be one of those 2.7%, and you feel that there's a lot of benefits to doing so, okay, use this report as your secret weapon and tell your boss, you know what, 97% of the companies out there use it. Why aren't we? And there's so many different use cases for using high quality external threat intelligence. Top of the list, to improve our ability to detect indicators of attacks and indicators of compromise. Number 2, to prioritize vulnerabilities and exposures to reduce our attack surface. Number 3, to uncover threat actors impersonating our websites and social media accounts to capture credentials, steal sales, damage our brand. Number 4, to identify risks related to supply chains and third parties. Number 5, understand threat actors and their tactics and procedures, or TTPs. And finally, to uncover evidence of data breaches, stolen credentials on the dark web. So a lot of different use cases here. Brandon, I'm going to guess that you're drinking this Kool-Aid as well.
Yeah, I was having a conversation actually on Monday with someone about how, if done right, threat intelligence should inform all of the things in your security stack, right? You should prioritize your vulnerabilities by the threat intelligence. You should prioritize attack types based on your threat intelligence. I think there's so much to be tapped into here that down the road, we're going to see huge dividends, but the trick is getting all these things to talk to one another. Seems to be that's where we need the human in the loop, at least from where I'm sitting. I don't know. What are your thoughts with regards to kind of the importance of threat intelligence?
I think it is pivotally, extremely important, but it can be automated, and it should be automated. Whether you're using out-of-the-box vendor APIs to do the automation, or using a threat intelligence platform to do the automation, no one wants any security tool to operate in a vacuum. Okay, and so we want to share, threat intelligence, from these external sources across your security ecosystem. So that part can certainly be automated. But this also provides analysts, okay, security analysts, and the incident response team with lots of good intelligence for investigating threats, to validate threats, and to understand cyber adversaries. So lots of good use cases here. All right. And then emerging technologies. And every year, this is always the last question in our survey. And some of these, I think, we're reaching the point whether our zero trust and SASE are they really emerging? They're starting to become really household names in terms of technologies and concepts that are being embraced. Zero trust, of course, is not a technology. It's a mindset. Like DevSecOps is not a technology. It's a mindset. It's a practice. It's a belief. So, but regardless, we asked, describe your organization's deployment plans for each of the following emerging IT security technologies. Now, there's 4 colors. The color in light blue is currently in production. The medium blue, implementation in progress. Dark blue, implementation to begin soon. The red, no plans whatsoever. Okay. So across the board, 7 in 10 organizations have already begun implementing each of these security technologies. If you're not familiar with ITDR, Identity Threat Detection Response, I would say identity security just in general is one of the hottest categories of technologies. There's so many new vendors, so much cool stuff out there. So I do recommend embracing that. Another newish category is SaaS security posture management. And Brandon and I did a webinar earlier this year on emerging security technologies specifically. We talked a lot about these. Passwordless authentication. We also talked about that in that webinar. Where there's so many different options for passwordless authentication, not just fingerprints and eye scans, but having lots of different devices for authenticating. So risk-based vulnerability management, quick plug for that. We did a webinar, I think it was 2 years ago, on risk-based vulnerability management last year. Or no, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago. And then earlier this year, we talked about evolving from vulnerability management to cyber exposure management. And if you are not drinking the Kool-Aid here on risk-based vulnerability management, or if you want to call it cyber exposure management, take a sip. It's really, really tasty. And the reason is the vast majority of vulnerabilities are not exploited by malware. Okay, so we can't patch everything. There's not enough people. There's not enough hours in the day. We need to take production systems offline. There's only so many windows. We need to prioritize. Long gone are the days where we should be prioritizing based on CVSS score alone. Okay, so we know common vulnerability scoring system for every CVE, common vulnerability exposure in the MITRE database. So every vulnerability, every vuln has a CVE number, and every vuln has a CVSS score. 9 and 10 is critical, and then there's high and medium and low. So too many organizations are still prioritizing patching based on CVSS score alone. That is very bad. Okay, because you're wasting your time and you're putting your organization at risk. You need to adopt this new mentality of risk-based vulnerability management or cyber exposure management. So you're prioritizing not only just on CVSS score, but on how important the asset is to your business. Okay, is it part of your e-commerce system, or is it an internal system for submitting time off, like vacation requests? But also, are there exploits in the wild? Is there in the wild that correspond to these vulnerabilities? Okay, so in any given year, between 1 in 10 or 1 in 4 vulnerabilities is actually exploited by malware. So we know what malware is out there. We know what malware corresponds to known vulnerabilities. You know what? Let's take that into consideration. Okay, so let's prioritize the vulnerabilities that have malware associated with them and have high CVSS scores, and especially if they're important to the business and they're internet facing. So please check out that webinar recording on cyber exposure management. That's the most recent one to learn more about this topic here. So Brandon, before we move on, any words of wisdom on emerging security technologies?
I would say pay special attention to hardware authentication. I'm thinking like the FIDO compliant stuff, as well as kind of along the passwordless sign, right? It's everything from Windows Hello to Face ID to all of those. I think those technologies that are going to improve the multi-factor experience, like passkeys and such, because they have such a wide impact on the user population and improves that kind of end user experience, I think those are going to be more and more popular as security teams look to reduce friction and to kind of prop up their good name. Instead of being the office of no, they're now enabling strong security in a more user-friendly way.
Yeah, very good. All right,
Just a
three more.
theory.
Yeah, I'm completely on board. Yeah, completely agree. And that's something we talked about in detail in that webinar that we did a few months ago. So this is the only slide that is a flashback to our 22 CDR and data points from our 2019 Cyber Threat Defense Report. Okay, so we asked which of the following functions are you outsourcing to a managed security service provider, an MSSP? And of course, one of the options is we're not outsourcing anything to an MSSP. So let's look at the chart on the left. So in 2019, that's the light blue, 9 in 10, exactly 90% of organizations are working with an MSSP. Okay. Fast forward 3 years to 2022, 93%. Okay. So if you are one of those organizations, and especially if you're experiencing a shortage in security personnel, this is a great way to help mitigate that backlog of security talent. So please do consider working with an MSP or an MSSP to outsource one or more security functions. Now, which functions are most commonly outsourced to MSSP? In 2019, and now we're looking at the chart on the right, the light blue is 2019, the dark blue is 22. Okay. And so it's kind of the inverse. So in 2019, managing vulnerability scans and mitigating DDoS attacks, those were the most common functions to outsource. Fast forward just 3 years, that's at the bottom of the list. Okay. Top of the list is a two-way tie between monitoring and managing SIM platforms and detecting and responding to advanced threats. And this is where organizations are working with managed MDR providers, so managed detection and response. So that's detecting and mitigating the risks of advanced threats. That is tied with first place with SIMs for outsourcing to MSSPs. Beyond that, monitoring and managing WAFs, IDS, IPS, secure web gateways and secure email gateways, monitoring and managing firewalls, NGFWs and or UTMs, Unified Threat Management, and then we already talked about DDoS and vulnerability scans here. So did you come across this, Brandon, in your conversations with CISOs? A lot of organizations outsourcing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we keep hearing about, the talent shortage and such, and I think it's kind of an eventuality, right? They're going to go to where they have the talent on tap, so to speak. But also, it's just an operational burden. I mean, think about how many people you have to hire. You got to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or have multiple operations centers in multiple time zones. I mean, it's just a business process optimization that I think is driving a lot of the demand. And don't forget, even the product companies are now becoming the MSSP. So before it was I would buy a SIM. Now I've got a SIM that's bundled with the service from the manufacturer. And so I think that they're growing the services side of their revenue very specific to their own product, which I think is interesting. Even Microsoft got in the game of doing EDR. So I think it's these numbers don't surprise me at all.
Yeah, and also if you're thinking about working with an MSSP, don't go in it with the mindset that we're going to save money. Okay, you might save money, but the biggest reason I think, I mean, aside from mitigating the backlog of security talent, okay, that's a big motivator. But also these MSSPs, they have been there, done that. Okay, so if you're motivated by outsourcing, detecting and responding to advanced threats, they have professionals that they live it and breathe it, and that's all they do. I remember when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, at some point there, the Kentucky Fried Chicken commercials. Kentucky Fried Chicken, we do chicken right. Okay, so they don't do burgers, they don't do subs, they do chicken. And so these MSSPs, they do cybersecurity and these different things, and they do it right. So you're embracing very talented people. You're embracing gold standards for procedures and policies and technologies and dot 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 dot. So please do consider working with MSSPs if you're not already. And then the last topic, and there's 2 slides on this, the value of IT security training. Honestly, the value of training in terms of job satisfaction has nothing in the world to do with cybersecurity. This is a universal concept. I've seen multiple studies where, like, training is like the number one thing that can help improve satisfaction, which we're going to see on the next slide. But we asked, describe your agreement with the following statement. Classroom and or online IT security training have helped me better protect my organization and or my customers' critical assets. Okay. So if you add together the strongly agree and the somewhat agree, what is that? I'm trying to do math in my head here. 90s or about 90s whatever percent or no 80 okay 46 plus 42 86%. So this is overwhelming that it's helping them to do their job better. And of course, there's other motivations like increased compensation or increased street cred. We didn't say street cred in the survey, but there's a lot of benefits to achieving for obtaining certification. Now, another question we asked is, which of the following would help improve your overall job satisfaction in your company's IT security organization? We allow the respondents to select up to 5. And there's all kinds of reasons here. But number one, top of the list is getting security training and certification. Number one for improving job satisfaction. Okay. And then beyond that is the Benjamins, increasing compensation, work schedule flexibility, job performance recognition. Everybody wants to be recognized for doing a job well done, and all these other things. Okay. But remember back to the challenge of you have a backlog of security talent. So you want to make sure that you retain your existing talent. You want to make sure that you recruit top talent. Use training and certification as a carrot. Okay. So on the recruiting side, maybe you bundle it in where, you know what, after you're here 6 months, you are eligible to become a CISSP like me or whatever training. And there's so many different certifications, that are relevant to different roles in the organization. On the retaining side, you've now been with the company for 2 years after you're here. I'm making this up. Whatever you want, 6 months, 2 years, whatever. You're eligible for training and certification. So if you want to help mitigate that problem of your shortfall of security talent, training and certification is a great way to do that, and you're improving job satisfaction. So with that, Brandon, we've got 5 whole minutes for any questions from the audience.
Well, I thought a particularly telling one here came in from Jared. Have you seen any technology percentages year over year that plateaued in their both current and planned use? Do we see any taper? Because some things are, I already have it, I don't need a new one. But is there anything that surprised you about maybe where things didn't take off as you thought they would?
One thing that comes to mind is NAC. Okay, so network access control. I remember, oh gosh, 15 years ago. So I've attended the RSA conference in San Francisco, I think 15 or 16 consecutive years that they've had it. Of course, there was a break during COVID. But I remember one of my first RSA conferences, it was like NAC was one of the biggest things. And every third booth was something related to network access control. And so I really like the Gartner model of the hype cycle, where you have the peak of expectations or whatever it is, the trough of disillusionment, and the plateau of productivity and whatever. And NAC certainly went through that. So NAC is one of those things where we see it on the report, and it's just sort of staying in the middle. Okay, not a lot of increased adoption. It's widely used, but not particularly hot. I think it's one of those, and I think it's really great technology. an analogy is you're at a carnival and there's a roller coaster, or at an amusement park, and you have to be tall enough to get on the ride. Otherwise, it's it's unsafe for you to get on the ride. Well, you should have that for devices connected to your network. Not only your employee devices, but your contractor devices or vendor devices that they're going to get on your Wi-Fi or whatever, and making sure that they have adequate endpoint security, make sure that there's no critical vulnerabilities that haven't been patched, and it, either prevent them from connecting, where you give them remediation guidance, or at least alert, so that you can, if it's an employee, fix it after the fact. So I think it's really, really cool stuff. But that's an example that comes to mind.
No, I think you're right. And I think the shift to remote work and everything probably stalled a lot of that from a deployment perspective. One question I'd love to see come up on this report every year would be the kind of strategic consolidation, right? We've seen, for example, Palo Alto Networks has bought everybody. You can get most of your security stack from them. Microsoft, between in-house development and acquisitions, similar. Cisco buying Splunk, same. And I'd like to see how that has trended in the past towards, hey, I want to buy one vendor because it's easier to manage and I'm sure everything will work together. In light of the recent intergalactic IT outage that we had over the weekend, I'm wondering if that pendulum would swing the other way. Well, we've had a lot of questions about it. I wasn't going to address it head on.
It's sort of outside the scope of security to begin with.
But
it wasn't a security thing.
Yeah.
It was, no, that's fair. Gartner has certainly addressed that in their research, and I don't have the stat in front of me, but a couple years ago, there was a stat where the vast majority of security teams are looking to consolidate security technologies and source them from one platform for a variety of different reasons. Certainly acquisition costs, but also ease of procurement, ease of customer support, have one number to call when you need something. So I think there's a lot of good data points out there, but we can certainly consider that as part of our CDR.
I think it'd be an interesting data point. Well, Steve, it's always great having you on. I'm looking forward to next year in about 4 weeks, my friend. Take care. Enjoy your summer.